Did you know that around 3500 BC, someone invented writing? Yeah, me neither. I didn't realize that was that old. Writing, that thing that you're reading these words with right now, it turns out was invented about 5,500 years ago. And to be more precise, it was invented right here in this general area, Mesopotamia, also known as the Fertile Crescent, also known as the cradle of civilization. The first known system of writing was developed here in Sumer around 3500 BCE, which is like, 6 or 7,000 years before Shakespeare wrote Hamlet, which was totally not written on a computer. The ancient Sumerians didn't have a computer, so they had to write it on a clay tablet with a stylus. Now, before this time, people had been developing more advanced tools for thousands of years. They'd been living in settlements that eventually grew into cities. They'd even invented the wheel around here, somewhere between 3,700 and 3,500 BC. But they were still doing everything with their hands, no robots, no iPads, not even an abacus. Everything was done by hand, which, that sounds like it would be pretty labor-intensive. So how did they keep track of everything they needed to keep track of? Well, there are a few theories, but we don't really know exactly how or why the Sumerians came up with writing. But we do know that they kept records on clay tablets. These are pieces of baked clay that the Sumerians would use as a sort of notepad. They would write on them with a stylus, a pointed tool that they would use to press into the clay and make an impression. The impressions they made would stay in the clay permanently, just like when you press your finger into modeling clay. It leaves an imprint. In other words, it's a very low-tech version of etching something into stone. The Sumerians weren't the only ones doing this. Other cultures around the world had also started using some form of picture writing at this point. The difference with Sumer was that their system of writing became much more complex. The Sumerians started out using pictograms, pictures that looked like the objects they represented. A circle with a dot in the middle could represent the sun, for example, but they soon developed a more abstract pictography, which is a type of writing where the symbols didn't necessarily look like the things they represented. Take this symbol for water. It looks nothing like water, does it? It's just a wavy line. This kind of writing is a lot more flexible, because you can come up with a lot more symbols that can represent a lot more ideas. And that's not all. The Sumerians also developed the world's first phonetic alphabet, a writing system where each symbol stood for a sound. This is different from a logographic writing system, which is what we have in Chinese, where each character stands for an entire word. We don't know exactly how the Sumerian phonetic alphabet worked, but we think it sounded something like this. That doesn't seem very phonetic. It almost sounds like they're just making up random sounds. But remember, these symbols weren't written down. They were pressed into soft clay. So it's possible that the Sumerians used their mouths to form the shapes for these symbols. This is called the language of gesture, and it's still used today in sign language. So if the Sumerians were making these symbols with their mouths, it makes sense that they would start to resemble the sounds they were making. It wasn't until the Phoenicians came along a few hundred years later that the phonetic alphabet really took off. But the Sumerians had invented it. They had developed the world's first writing system, and they did it right here in this general area, right here in the cradle of civilization. So next time you want to feel bad because you haven't finished that book you started last week, or you haven't written that screenplay, you've been meaning to write, or you haven't sent that email you've been meaning to send, just remember, you could be sitting there thinking that you read behind on your work while someone 6,000 years ago is inventing the concept of being behind on your work. And yeah, that's progress. So huge thanks to the Sumerians, and also huge thanks to the modern-day Sumerians who helped us make this episode. If you want to see how the Sumerians influenced math, science, and music, then you'll want to check out the series in the description. Hey, if you liked this video, hit that subscribe button. Why? Because you want to be reminded about all the great videos that we have coming up. Trust me, you don't want to miss a single one.